It was written, got to work on this deal. It was written by Anthony Showalter back in the 1800s. The verses, the God of old is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. The reason he wrote it was he was a music teacher, and he got letters almost back to back from two of his former students telling him that their wives had died. And so as he was trying to come up with a letter of consolation to those guys, this verse came to mind, and consequently that song was written. Getting to know Jesus better through the Gospel of John, tonight through the 7 signs of John. It's really a lifelong journey trying to get to know Jesus better. It's never too late to start. Like I mentioned last week, I've known about Jesus since I was 0, but it's been a lifelong journey trying to get to know him better. Matter of fact, while I was digging around through my stack of Bibles, I found my first Bible, which I knew where it was, but I wasn't sure which exact shelf. But my first Bible I got in 1955. I was 3. I still got it. It was given to me by my Sunday school teachers at that time. It's signed by all 5 of them. Back in those days, at least in the small churches, and I'm not sure there was too many mega churches back in 1955, but those 5 women, they kept an eyeball on me clear up till I was about 18. They kept up with you back then from birth to as long as you guys were, as long as you're still going to that church. Well, we're talking about the 7 signs tonight. We'd call them miracles. Some of the other gospels refer to them as wonders or powers. Matter of fact, I think it's Mark where he uses the word power, which in the Greek is dunamis. We get our word dynamite from it. That's how powerful these signs are. John uses the word signs because he's trying to point people to Jesus. And the signs aren't meant to call attention to themselves, but to the one performing them. In this case, Jesus. And Jesus demonstrates his equality with God by confirming his power as creator. The signs demonstrate power over quality, space, time, quantity, nature, misfortune, and death. The miracles of Jesus brought peace and joy to the recipients and their families. Creator God making someone's life better. And they told the people that Jesus was from God and that he was God, if he could do these kind of things. Now, most of the miracles seem to have been healings. You know, nobody wants to be in pain, so it's always great when you can relieve someone's pain. Matter of fact, no one wants to be in pain so much that there's doctors that specialize in pain management. Science has come a long way in figuring out ways to relieve pain. So there's all kind of pain pills out there, pills for pain. But there's not any pills for joy. If you want joy, real joy that comes from the Lord. There are some I don't care pills out there. I've had a few of those for a dental implant and during some chemotherapy that I went through. They give you that, and then you just don't care what they do to you. All kind of drugs, but nothing that'll bring you real joy. And joy and happiness aren't always the same thing. You can be full of joy and not really necessarily be happy, but joy can certainly include and bring on happiness. You can be happy for a while because of something going on, but joy is more than that. Joy is a state of mind. It's a feeling of well-being, and it is hope in the future. Joy helps you see through the storms of life, and believe me, if you haven't been through a storm of life, you probably will before long. the Lord is the real source of joy. John 15:11. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you and your joy might be full. Jesus wants us to have joy. I can be having a bad day and still find joy. There's joy out there because Jesus puts it in you, and you just got to sometimes look for it. Last week, I told you that I've always sought God's will in directing my life, but that doesn't mean I've always done God's will. It doesn't mean I didn't do a bunch of stupid stuff, but it means that I wanted to follow God even when I knew I wasn't. I kept praying, and hopefully I'm on a better track. From the beginning of my earliest memories, even as I can remember specifically a prayer when I was in high school that God would put me where he wants me. And without getting into too many details, because we just don't have time for that, the class isn't about me anyway, but I will say this: I never dreamed in my wildest imagination that I would end up working with people with disabilities. And I didn't get started in that field until I was 38. And if we had time and if anybody was interested, I could take you through all of the steps where God opened doors and put me in places that I had no intention of ever being or ever thought about being. But finally, I ended up at the Oklahoma Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. Mainly, I ended up there in my mind because I needed a job and I applied for it. And Phil Watson, who happened to be director of the agency at that time, I didn't go to him and ask him anything because I didn't want him doing me any special favors, but my wife did. She went to him. And so he called over there to the people in charge of hiring. He said, if this Adams guy is qualified, I think you need to make sure he gets the job. But if he's not qualified, then don't give it to him. And so as it turned out, I was qualified because what I had applied for at that time was an electronics technician job because that was my field. But over the years, I ended up moving into other areas. I ended up actually being the director of the place. But it was very rewarding. When I first showed up to work there, I thought this has got to be a 5-year deal max because this place is in serious trouble. It's got problems. But things worked out. Didn't take me long before I started finding out that the people we were serving really benefited from our service. People who were blind and had no way without this kind of service to enjoy a book or a magazine. And so we circulated books and magazines in Braille and on audio so that they could have a better quality of life by listening to a book. And believe me, it makes a big difference. Well, that was our job, to help people with disabilities have better quality of life. And when I moved on from the library after 21 years, I was working with people with all kinds of disabilities, helping them to get training so they could have a job and so they could have a better quality of life. Be careful what you ask for when you ask God to put you in the right place where he wants you, because he might do it. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Psalm 16:11. With all of these things in mind about where I used to work, let me tell you that sign number 3 and 6 are my favorites. The healing of the man who was lame for 38 years and the man who was blind from birth. But we're going to look at all 7. We're all here because of miracles. Creation and the complex and fragile nature of life is not and was not an accident. There's no telling really how many miracles Jesus performed, thousands probably, only a fraction recorded in the New Testament. And depending on how you count them, looking through all the Gospels, you're going to come up with somewhere between 36 to 40 in the New Testament. John records 7. He was an old guy when he wrote this. He was about 10 years older than me. In other words, he was about Larry Young's age. So he was thinking back on all these miracles that he had seen. And I wonder how he came up with these 7. Were they his 7 favorite ones? Were they 7 being a complete number? Maybe they were miracles that showed the complete nature of what Christ was doing with these miracles. Or maybe just the Holy Spirit guided him and said, here's the 7 I want you to write about. Well, whatever or however these 7 were decided on, his purpose is clear because he plainly states it in John chapter 20, verse 30. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. There was a purpose in these signs. And then for sure, we know he witnessed so many others. John 21:25, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for all the books that would be written. Meeting Jesus changed lives. People in the first century had little hope, especially people with disabilities. They were the outcasts of society. They were seen as a burden. Their family members or whoever they lived with would carry them to a busy spot in the city, along a road or at the city gates, so that they could beg for whatever people would give them so that they could contribute to the family, putting bread on the table, something to eat. In the Greek and Roman times, it was believed that children who were born disabled were unwanted by the gods, that their disabilities were a form of punishment, some misbehavior or sin, especially on the part of their parents. But the Jews should have known better, because God told Moses to make sure that people with disabilities were taken care of. In Leviticus 19:14, it says, "Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord." But even still, the disciples thought disabilities were a curse. In John 9:1, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So when this guy named Jesus showed up on the scene, healing people, that was a big deal, a very big deal. He created hope where there was no hope. It's no wonder that there were thousands of people following him around. When we think about the feeding of the 5,000, that was just men. Talk about women and children, there might have been 20,000 following him around. I can't even imagine it. If I had a time machine right now, that's where I'd go. I'd go right there so I could see that. That's more people than the, whatever they call it now. It's not the Chesapeake anymore. It's some other thing because somebody else gave the Thunder or the city more money. So it's called something else.
Paycom.
Paycom. Oh, pay up. Pay up and we'll put your name on it. Okay. That thing only holds, I just looked it up a while ago. It holds 18,200 for a basketball game. 18,203 to be exact. And, there's more of that out here on the streets following Jesus around. No wonder the Jewish leadership started freaking. They saw their control and their influence going down the tubes. It's no wonder that the Romans were concerned. I mean, this many people, this looks like some kind of revolt. But the miracles that Jesus carried out while he was here in the flesh were to show the world that he was from God and what kind of God the Father is, that he cares for his creation, that he values everyone. In John 14, verse 8, Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip? Even after I've been among you so long? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Jesus went to the poor. He went to the disabled, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, everyone that society looked down on. That's where he went because he cares for those people. He loved little children. He was even the kind of shepherd that would go after one lost sheep. This is the Jesus I want to know better. The better I know him, the better I can be like him, putting other people first, paying attention to folks who aren't being paid attention to. One former administrator for the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services, where I used to work, he told his staff that by doing their job, and their job was to improve the quality of life of disabled people in Oklahoma, he said, when you do your job every day, you're doing the Lord's work. Because that's who the Lord went to first. Tonight, my outline is based on a book that I highly recommend. It's called John, the Gospel of Belief, an analytical study of the text by Merrill C. Tenney. He divides the ministry of Jesus as recorded in the Gospel of John into three distinct periods. The period of consideration, chapters 1 through 4, where Jesus is presented to the public for their consideration and acceptance. He sees chapter 5 and 6 as the period of controversy. It shows the development of opposition. We start seeing people getting upset about what Jesus is saying and doing. And then the third part of his ministry, chapter 7 through 11, he calls the period of conflict. In these chapters, we see lines being drawn in the sand, so to speak. Many people believe, but many people also turn against Jesus. All of the 7 signs happen during the first 11 chapters. We find the first 2 signs in the period of consideration, where people are being introduced to Jesus and it causes belief. The first sign, he turns water into wine, shows Jesus' power, Tenney says, over quality, time, and nature. The wine he made was the best wine possible. Plus, when you think about it, wine's always made with water anyway. The seeds or the vine cuttings have to be watered to live. You have to trellis the vine, prune it. Takes several years just for the first harvest. Now, I've never made wine, but from what I read about it, it looks like there are 11 steps in the process. And except for better tools, better equipment, and better technology, the process is the same as it was 6,000 years ago. The process after harvest takes years. Apparently, the longer it takes, the better the wine. Jesus made the absolute best wine that normally takes years and years. He did it instantly. The result was twofold at least: belief for the disciples and joy to the groom's family. John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding as well. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother told him, "They don't have any wine." "What does that have to do with you and me, woman?" Jesus asked. My hour has not yet come. "Do whatever he tells you," she told the servants. Now 6 stone water jars had been set there for Jewish purification. Each contained 20 or 30 gallons. "Fill the jars with water," Jesus told them. So they filled them to the brim. Then he said, "Now draw some out and take it to the head waiter." And they did. When the head waiter tasted the water after it had become wine, he did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He called the groom and told him, "Everyone sets out the fine first, but then after people are drunk, the inferior. But you've kept the fine wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Remember, the Jews were very familiar with the books of Moses. They knew those scriptures forwards and backwards. And so the disciples would have immediately connected what Jesus did with what Moses did by changing the water of the Nile into blood. Jesus changed water into wine. They believed. They knew it was a big deal. But not only that, Jesus saved the day for this family. Running out of wine was a big deal. That would have been like a disaster. It would have brought disgrace on the family. We don't have all the details, of course, but maybe the bride's parents didn't really like the groom's parents anyway. So if they ran out of wine, it's just another thing they can gripe about. We told you not to marry this guy. They ran out of wine. They don't even know how to throw a party. Well, I'm not really sure Jesus was really ready to do his first sign. But when your mama gets involved, Jesus did it anyway. And he saved face for this family. He saved the event, saved them from an embarrassment. The second sign, the healing of the nobleman's son, shows power over space and illness. And it speaks volumes about the nobleman's faith. Almost certainly a Roman, and the Romans didn't think much of Jews. This guy had heard about Jesus and he knew Jesus could help. So he sucked it up. I don't care if I don't like Jews anyway. This guy seems to be doing stuff and I'm going to go to him. So he went to him and he begged because he loved his son. John 4, beginning at verse 46. He went again to Cana of Galilee, where he turned the water into wine. There was a certain royal official whose son was ill at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea into Galilee, he went to him and pleaded with him to come down and heal his son, since he was about to die. Jesus told him, unless people see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Sir, the official said to him, come down before my boy dies. Go, Jesus told him, your son will live. The man believed what Jesus said and departed. While he was still going down, his servants met him, saying his boy was alive. He asked them at what time he got better. Yesterday, at 1 p.m. The fever left him. They answered. The father realized this was the very hour at which Jesus told him, your son will live. So his whole household believed along with him. See a pattern here? Do what Jesus tells you. The servants did what Jesus told him on the wine, on the water. This guy did what Jesus told him. If we do what Jesus tells us, we can't go wrong. Jesus didn't even have to be present. The Father took him at his word. What a profession of faith that is. Everyone in his household believed. Jesus brought joy in place of sorrow to that family. In the period of controversy, chapters 5 and 6, there are three signs. The healing of the man at the pool. That's sign number 3. It's one of my favorites. Jesus demonstrates power over time and nature. So where are we? We're at the pool of Bethesda. Bethesda means house of mercy. And let me tell you, when Jesus showed up, he gave this guy a good dose of mercy. There was a rumor about this pool that at certain times, an angel would come and stir the water, and the first person in after that happened would be healed. In some translations, that verse is left out because it's not in some of the earlier or better manuscripts. But I personally like the verse, and I'm a big fan of the King James 16:11, and it's in there. Here's what it says. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. For whosoever then, first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. Now, this person at this pool who had been disabled for 38 years, he didn't call out for Jesus. Jesus went there, I think, looking for the guy. I think this was one of his divine appointments, kind of like the woman at the well. John 5, verses 1 through 9. After this, a Jewish festival took place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there's a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the disabled man answered, "I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me." "Get up," Jesus told him, "pick up your mat and walk." Instantly the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Now that day was a Sabbath. Here's another guy. He didn't really tell Jesus he wanted to get well. He just did what he said. Pick up his mat and walk. But this sign not only caused belief, it caused a lot of controversy. The Jewish leaders were more concerned with their rules and their laws than with a man being healed. They were mad because Jesus did it on the Sabbath, and they were mad because the guy picked up his mat and carried it on the Sabbath, which was against one of their 613 rules. But there's more to this story. This is kind of my favorite part, really. This guy obviously started doing some stuff he shouldn't be doing. Jesus came there and healed him after 38 years. After 38 years, he could walk and he could take part in activities. Here's what I'm thinking. Maybe I shouldn't think, but here's what I'm thinking. This guy's been sitting around for 38 years looking at sinful stuff on the sidelines. He might be having all kind of lustful thoughts, all kind of desires. And so when he gets this ability to walk, all of a sudden he might start joining in. Now, the disability wouldn't keep him from sinning, but since society looked down on people with disabilities, I doubt if anybody invited him to join in. Well, when Jesus saw him sinning, whatever it was he was doing, he warned him, "You need to knock this stuff off." That's my paraphrase. John 5:14. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen." When Jesus blesses us, we need to take that as a sign, don't we? Knock off the weirdo stuff and follow Jesus. The fourth sign, the feeding of the 5,000, demonstrates power over quantity and creation, but it also demonstrates how much Jesus cared about the people following him. Probably 20,000 or so when you figure the women and the children. They're tired. They're hungry. We don't really know how long they've been following him around looking for him. Maybe there's some tempers getting on edge. I figure this is probably the peak of Jesus' popularity, because after this sign and after the little sermonette he gives the day following, his popularity starts going downhill pretty fast. I think maybe there might have been a little humor in Jesus' voice in chapter 6, verses 5 through 6. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. In man's mind, Philip's mind, the thought was, we don't even have enough food or money to give everybody one bite. In Jesus' mind, they're all going to get all they want to eat. 5 small loaves and 2 fishes. Jesus turned that into a super buffet, like nothing we've ever seen. My dad used to call those all-you-can-eat deals, pitch till you win. Paul, let's go down and eat some catfish. It's pitch till you win. All right, I'm in. John 6, verses 9 through 13. There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. And so they did what Jesus said. There was plenty of grass in that place, so they sat down. The men numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also with the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were full, he told his disciples, collect the leftovers so that nothing is wasted. So they collected them, filled the 12 baskets with pieces from the 5 barley loaves that were left over by those who had eaten. Notice that nothing was wasted. To waste food in those days would have been unheard of, unthinkable. You just do not do it. If there's food left over, you collect it and you put it in a place that people who are hungry know to go look for it. Because there was people in those days starving and looking for something to eat. Talk about bringing joy to thousands of people. Who knows how long it had been since some of those folks had eaten anything, maybe days. Our son Matthew, who died 21 years ago when he was 26 from a very gross and nasty form of cancer. The last 2 years of his life, he couldn't eat anything. Everything went through a feeding tube. He couldn't eat anything. And so after he died and I got his Bible, I was going to put it on a shelf, but I saw these little notes sticking out of it. And there was 2 notes, and one of them was at the feeding of the 5,000, and the other one was at the feeding of the 4,000. And he said, Jesus feeding his people, how beautiful this is. The only thing I can figure he meant by that was, I can't wait till I get to heaven and Jesus will give me something to eat. John tells us that many people believe. They acknowledge Jesus as a prophet. They were ready to make him king right there on the spot. So Jesus got away to a lonely spot, obviously to go pray to the Father. And what did the disciples do? They got in a boat. They're going over to Capernaum, which leads us to the 5th sign, walking on water, which demonstrates his power over nature. A storm came up on that lake, fast and furious, big winds, rough waves. They were a long ways from the shore, plus it was dark, much scarier than the same storm would have been in the daylight. Let me tell you about dark and big waves. Years ago, Gene and I would go fishing at Lake Texoma sometimes at night. We were out there one night. If you're familiar with the lake, you know how fast a storm can come up. If you're familiar with the lake, you know that high winds can give you 4 to 6 foot swells out on that lake. We were out there one night and it was either somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. Can't remember exactly, but it was middle of the night and it was dark. And we were fishing and we saw lightning a few miles off. And all of a sudden the wind starts whipping up. And we are on a slow pontoon boat. And we are 2.5 to 3 miles from the boat dock. And it's dark and it's scary. And I'm pretty sure Gene was too. We were having a prayer meeting right there on that boat. And we were too scared and nervous to be praying out loud, but I know we were praying under our breath, but we made it in. So back to the disciples. And to make matters worse, they're out there and they don't even have a 25 horse motor like I did. They got, they're out there trying to row that thing. And so, they're scared. And to make it even worse, it's dark. And you know how your imagination can go crazy in the dark. They see something out there on the water. What is that? Who is that? How can that be? Well, I guess Jesus yelled at them and identified himself, and they realize it's Jesus, so they welcome him into the boat. Maybe they figured, good, we've been through this before, he can calm the storm. But he didn't do it. The Bible says, and John wrote, as soon as he entered the boat, they were miraculously transported to where they were going. Jesus got in the boat, and that thing was instantly at the shore. This is a two-for sign. 2 for 1, walking on water and instantly transported to shore. It kind of reminds me of Philip after baptizing that Ethiopian eunuch. It says when he came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, transported him to Azotus. Let's read it. John 6:16. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, started across the sea to Capernaum. Darkness had already set in, but Jesus had not yet come to them. A high wind rose and the sea began to churn. After they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea. He was coming near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said, "It's I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him on board, and at once the boat was at the shore where they were heading. Well, you can be sure that that sign brought a higher level of belief in the disciples, and I can't imagine how much joy it brought them, because they were probably fearing for their lives before Jesus showed up. But no matter how much joy it brought them, controversy is only a few hours away. The crowds find Jesus. They want another big free super buffet. But instead, Jesus teaches about food and drink that give eternal life, spiritual food that won't ever spoil. And he talks about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. Some people want to make that about the Lord's Supper, but I don't think so. This is about believing in Jesus as Messiah and becoming one with him, then continually feeding on him. It's a picture of being born again, entering in with Christ through baptism, then studying his word, living with him in communion, fellowship with him, always feeding on Jesus. It might be the closest thing we have to a parable in John. Anyway, whatever it is, it was so disgusting sounding and so controversial that huge numbers left. They quit following Jesus. They just couldn't handle it. John 6:60, on hearing it, many of his disciples said, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?" Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said, "Does this offend you?" Verse 63, "The Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they were full of the Spirit and life." Verse 66 to 69, "From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him." "You do not want to leave too, do you?" Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God." Belief, but yet controversy. And after this, things really ramp up in the period of conflict, chapter 7 through 11. Chapter 7 starts with this statement. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee. He did not want to go about Judea because the Jewish leaders were there looking for a way to kill him. As far as the Jewish leaders were concerned, Jesus was living on borrowed time. They had already figured, we're going to catch this guy and we're going to kill him. It's just a matter of time. To Jesus, though, things were right on schedule for his appointment with the cross. And the way John presents the story, Jesus has 2 more very important signs. These last 2 signs in John are just over the top. The Jewish leaders become so furious now that they decided to inflict punishment, not just on Jesus, but on the people, the recipients of the miracles. John 9:22 tells us that the Pharisees kicked the man who had been born blind out of the synagogue because he believed in Jesus. And the ultimate true character of the chief priest comes out in chapter 12, at verses 9 through 11. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, and not only not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. So not only do they want to get Jesus, they want to cause trouble to this blind guy by kicking him out of the synagogue. They're going to punish him, and they're going to punish Lazarus by killing him too. So they've just they're gone over the top. I mean, no wonder Jesus describes himself in chapter 10 as the good shepherd. Jerusalem was full of bad shepherds. Ezekiel 34 describes them. Verse 2, Ezekiel 34, this is what the sovereign Lord says: woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You've not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. The shepherds in Jesus' day weren't concerned with the people who were just trying to make do, who were just trying to put food on their table, who were disabled, who were sick. Back to John 11:46, then the chief priests said, and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe him, and the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. All they were concerned about was their own power. Back to Ezekiel 34, verse 10. This is what the sovereign Lord says: I'm against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending flocks so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. For this is what the sovereign Lord says: I myself will search for the sheep and look after them. The good shepherd, Jesus. He went to the people who were suffering, the people who were considered worthless by society, and the people that the chief priests and Pharisees didn't care about. The sixth sign, the healing of the man who was born blind. Power over misfortune, definitely my favorite of all. I worked with, and I know so many blind people, some of them blind from birth, some blind from disease, some blind from accidents. I know people who got their vision back, some surgery or another, some new technology that came up. Talk about being full of joy. These people, when they get their vision back, they are full of joy. I knew one guy who went blind suddenly. He was probably, 45, 50 years old. All of a sudden, he wakes up one morning and he's blind. He doesn't know what to do. He's desperate. Can't see a thing. Comes to our agency for help. We start trying to train him, and we're very successful at it. Our people were in training him on how to get around, how to feed himself, how to cook, how to do all the things, being blind. About 2 years later, this guy wakes up one morning and he's got his full sight back. He can see perfectly as he could 2 years before. You want to talk about somebody being full of joy? This guy was full of joy. He was so full of joy, he came and worked for our agency for free to help other people who were blind. Let's read about it. We got to move quick. John 8, verse 59. So they picked up stones to throw at him. They're ready to stone Jesus now. They picked up the stones, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. As he was passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents, Jesus answered. This came about so God's works might be displayed. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one could work. As long as I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world. After he said these things, he spit on the ground, made some mud from saliva, spread the mud on his eyes, and he told him to do something. Go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he left, washed, and came back seeing. Everybody knew this guy. They'd seen him for years begging. They knew he was born blind. Another example of Jesus telling a person what to do, though, and he did it. What did he do? He put mud on his eyes, tells him to go to the pool, sends him to the pool named Sent. Tell me this isn't a divine appointment. That pool's been named Sent for years and years and hundreds of years, and now Jesus is there, and he heals a guy by telling him, I'm sending you to the pool named Sent. So there he goes, a blind guy. He's got to go a half a mile. From where they are, that pool named Sent is a half mile away. And so here's a blind guy walking through the streets with mud pies on his eyes. Man, now that had to draw some attention. You want to talk about getting attention? He got it. The sign caused several reactions. Obviously, belief and joy for the blind guy, and belief and a whole lot of fear for his parents. John 9, verse 20, we know he's our son, the parents answered. We know he was born blind, but how he can see again or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He'll speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, afraid of the bad shepherds who had decided that anyone that acknowledged Jesus was Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. And unbelief and anger to the bad shepherds of Israel. They ask him, what did he do to you? I love what this guy says to him. I mean, this guy's got guts. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I've told you already and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Man, that's great. Well, so Jesus gets out of town to get a little rest. And he gets a message. Your friend Lazarus is sick. Seventh sign, final sign, the raising of Lazarus, power over death. Another divine appointment to show God's glory, because obviously Jesus could have went earlier, but he didn't. He decided we're going to stay around here a couple of days. And so he stays around a couple of days. John 11, 1 through 7. Now a man was sick, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. When Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it's for God's glory, so that the Son of God might be glorified through it. And then he finally tells his disciples, no, Lazarus isn't just sleeping. He's really dead. Let's go. And so when he gets there and he sees how upset everybody is, Jesus himself wept, it says in John 11:35, but he tells them to do something, and they do it. Remove the stone. And he removes the stone and he raises Lazarus from the dead. The name Lazarus means God has helped. I love Bible names. They all mean something. I have a Bible name. It's wrong. My Bible name is Paul, which means small. I'm not small. Look at my waistline. There's nothing small about me. My mother gave me the wrong name. Well, in conclusion, if he can raise Lazarus from the dead, he can raise us from the dead. He can raise us to eternal life. Think about just for a moment those empty vessels that Jesus used to turn water into wine. Without Jesus, our bodies are just empty vessels. But when we let Jesus fill us with his Holy Spirit, we're changed into something beautiful. People with joy and the desire to help others have joy too. The miracles of Jesus made people glad in the midst of everything bad. They received joy. If you're having a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, a bad year with no end of bad in sight, look around and find something to be glad about, because Jesus has put it there. He's put it in you. But the righteous, it says in Psalm 68, verse 3, but the righteous are glad. They rejoice before the Lord and celebrate with joy. Sing to God. Sing praises to his name. Exalt him who rides on the clouds. His name is Yahweh, and rejoice before him. When good things happen to people, when joy comes to their house, we should all rejoice with them, not get upset like the Pharisees or like the chief priests. Don't get jealous because good fortune has come to someone else. As far as I'm concerned, miracles still happen every day. Every time a baby is born, every time we take a breath and are able to exhale, every time someone decides to believe in Jesus. I believe that through my cancer, Jesus healed me. I know there was doctors involved and technology involved, but I believe the Holy Spirit led me through it, saw me through it, healed me from it. So we're going to close tonight with a little short prayer that's been handed down by the Jews for centuries and who still use it today. It says, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, for keeping us alive, taking care of us, and bringing us to this time. We are dismissed. Next week, we're going to see Jesus talking about himself, the 7 I am statements in John. Thanks for being here.